EJ Wise is a prominent Australian expert in cybersecurity law. Now, earlier this week, the federal government moved to ramp up its cybersecurity powers and gave the Australian Signals Directorate powers to take over the computer systems of any critical infrastructure company unable or unwilling to defend itself against a major cyber attack. Today, we've got Emma here to talk us through this and what it will mean for businesses and society as a whole. Good morning, Emma.
Good morning, Michael.
Now, critical infrastructure, what would that be? Our power, lights, water, etc., or is it broader than that?
It's a good question, Michael. So I think prior to the pandemic, there was certainly a very military and government-based view of what critical infrastructure would entail. So yes, the arms of the government, the machinery of government, which includes the Defence Department, power, water, fuel. But honestly, when we came into an actual pandemic where we were locked down, things like allowing people to get into a supermarket to feed themselves and keep themselves alive broadened what we think of as critical infrastructure, and in some ways that leaves an even bigger gaping hole for cyber criminals to get in and infiltrate.
Now, this isn't just about ransomware attacks for business and a business cost. This actually goes to our security as a nation, doesn't it?
It really does, and it's a very interesting time this year, 2021 in particular. So up until now, there had been no real dialogue internationally that was the equivalent of, for example, we have what are called the laws of war, and they came into power through the Geneva Conventions as a fallout of World War II. And you have under the Geneva Conventions and additional protocols certain rules for armed conflict, and those rules apply, and they apply whatever your weapon is. So even when cyber is your weapon, they apply, and the international community is quite agreed when it comes to cyber that the international law applies. But earlier this year at the United Nations, there was an open-ended working group where, in addition to agreeing that the UN Charter, for example, which prevents an armed attack and allows the use of armed force, in response to an attack, they also came up with some agreements about what would be fair and safe in non-war environment of cyberspace. So that's also very new. But yes, to your point, at what particular time can we attribute an action to either a nation state, another country, or a non-nation state actor, or a business, or then it's just a bunch of teenagers in a shed doing some weekend criminal activity? And the thing for the government is it's a little bit blind, and if the businesses aren't telling them, hey, we've been attacked, this is happening now, how can they assess, wow, we got 20 of these exactly identical incursions or breaches to 20 top tier businesses in the same week? This is now a threat to our actual nation state, and we need to respond accordingly. So I've actually got some sympathy for why the government might want to flex, if you like, in this space.
Now, as a business owner, this sounds a little bit ominous, a little bit Big Brother, George Orwellish, where the government can come in and take over my computer system. How are they going to incentivise this? I'm a small business running it close to the bone, and suddenly they say, right, you need to employ somebody specifically in this area, and you need about $60,000 worth of investment in better security. Are they going to incentivise it, or are they just going to force it on business?
Yeah, well, I've been saying for some time it would be lovely to have the equivalent of a slip, slop, slap ad campaign just drumming through our heads. We all, I think, well, certainly people of my age, can run around humming that tune, sounds like a breeze when you say it like that. Why aren't we doing that for cybersecurity for home dwellers, let alone small businesses? So the first thing I think I'd say is I don't think this is targeted to smaller enterprises. And what they are hoping the smaller enterprises will do is direct themselves over to the Australian Cybersecurity Centre's website. And or even if you can't remember that, it's a bit of a mouthful, think Scam Watch and throw that into your search engine, because in there they're really doing their best to give a whole bunch of free tools and ideas to smaller business owners that can't afford to have someone on cybersecurity on their staff, can't afford $60,000 off the shelf software as a service. So I think, we've made some real improvements, but my assessment after sort of living and working in the States for 8 years is Australia's still a little bit behind in engaging the community, because it all starts with a person not understanding that this little device is actually very dangerous.
There, as far as the Signals Directorate coming in, will they issue warnings? Has there been any legislation put forward? Is there a draft proposal about how they're going to go about this?
So there's been some critical infrastructure legislation bouncing around for a bit. There's also a proposed ransomware bill that was put forward by Tim Watts, the Shadow MP, and that's now been responded to officially by the federal government. With another version of a ransomware notification legislation, and these aren't in existence yet. The newer proposal by the federal government for ransomware notification, whereas Tim Watts' one version was you would notify when you paid a ransom to the federal government. And again, I have some sympathy for why the federal government wants to know that. It's really not about getting into your behaviours, and it certainly won't lead to conviction of a company, big, large or medium, for paying it. It's so they know what's going on in their backyard. Intelligence, which military and governments rely on very heavily, as do banks and other corporate bodies, are about piecing together a picture. And if you aren't getting that information in the door, you really are a little bit operating in the blind, and it can lead to the wrong assumptions, which can be really, really bad in geopolitical world. So his one was you would report on paying. The later version that the federal government's proposing is actually you're going to report on finding out that you have a ransomware attack occurring. And honestly, I think they've both got pros and cons. But again, that's early days. We haven't seen anything in writing yet from the federal government, whereas Tim Watts's version was an actual bill he proposed.
Now, I read a frightening statistic. I think there's a major cyber attack or intrusion every 30 minutes or something in Australia at the moment. Is that right?
Oh, I'd say that's a conservative estimate based on my experience. You need to sort of step back and think about every part of your life that touches the internet, and whether it's an Internet of Things or an IoT, Internet of Things device. You might like to have all these smart features in your home. You might like to have lights that turn on and off, or heating that does. That's connected to the internet, and it's a vulnerability. And then when you step back further and think, my aunt, uncle has a pacemaker, can that be affected? Yes, it's an Internet of Things device. All so much of the medical apparatus that's been vital in saving lives pre and post COVID weren't built with security in mind. So cyber people like myself walk around the world. The movie I See Dead People, I see vulnerability. So that statistic is, if anything, conservative in my mind.
So the thing is, with the latest cyber attacks, wars, as you were saying, won't happen in the physical world. First of all, they'll switch off our lights. They'll interrupt our logistics, where everything is track and trace, where they can switch off the supply chain. And then once we're hungry, we can't rush out and buy our toilet paper, then they'll get us. Is that the scenario we're looking at, Emma?
So, I mean, this is one of those things where we talk about the contract between the citizen and the state. And it's not a foreign topic at the moment, because people are talking about all sorts of things with regards to the vaccine and what are your individual rights. You enter into a contract, more or less, with society when you choose to be a part of it. And in doing that, you say to the state, and for us, it's the federal government and the state or territory government, in return for my taxes, you will keep me safe from foreign threats. You will keep me safe from floods, fires, diseases. It's part of this contract. And there's give and take on both sides. When it comes to the cyber security, the government can't ensure that our banking is going to be safe, that our shores will be safe, that we will continue to exist in the democracy that we see as our democratic right, when it's a bit blind. And I think it could do really well with some nice education and proper explanation and public relations piece, if it's going down this track where it explains to people. And certainly I've seen all of the intelligence services agencies, ASD, everyone being a lot more open in the last 5 years than in any of the sort of 21 years of my own personal military service with the Air Force. And I think that's a good idea, because if you are going to, if you like, trade off some privacy and some rights that individuals and businesses might expect to otherwise have, tell them why you're doing it. It doesn't make us less secure to explain to the public, oh, well, geopolitics is complex. We honestly won't be able to attribute some of these attacks if we don't understand what's going on with those attacks. We can't tell the difference sometimes straight away with a cyber event as to whether it's a government event or a non-government event, and I'm talking about external actors, whether it's just, criminals. And so we need your help. It'd be really lovely to see the government doing that kind of engagement. I think I'm allowed a small amount of skepticism, because I don't know that we've done it that well, even with engaging members of our very multicultural community around Australia, with even vaccination. I think the vaccination hesitation is a really lovely analogy, because people don't want to put it in their arm if they don't know what it is. I'm lucky, if you might say. I've got a science degree and I'm able to assess the risks and benefits, and I chose, for example, to take the vaccination. But from a cyber perspective, again, I'm lucky. I understand the risks and benefits of allowing, or maybe not having a choice, the government to come in and look at my machine. Can I just trust them to do the right thing? There should be some give and take. It's a little bit like the movie The Castle. This is my frontier. This is my internet in my door. Do I not have a right to free enjoyment? Yes, you do, unless it's about to burst into fire, at which point we might ask you to evacuate, unless it's about to be, subsumed by a flooded river, in which case we might ask you to evacuate. Or in this case, unless your business that you probably run from home if you're in Melbourne right now, is about to be subsumed by a really sophisticated cyber crime, or even worse, a foreign state or a foreign state actor. And we know that we've got the if you like, the weather warning that you can't see. So for that period, we're going to step in and send firefighters in. We're going to carry you off your property. I mean, they won't do that for cyber, but I think we just need to understand, not that it's an always perfect, loving state, but there are some, I think, valid reasons behind it.
All right, Emma, thanks so much for your time today. It was fascinating.
Pleasure.